Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Resurrected A Winner Is You podcast. As ever, my name is David, and I'm sitting 2,002 miles across from Mr. Alex Aldridge. How are you doing today, Alex?
Ahoy, hoy! Pretty good.
I was thinking the other day, when we did the Scorn podcast, I don't think you knocked your mic into your face at any point.
Well, you see, talking about that is probably slightly confusing to the listeners because I normally edit that part out because, that's the most obvious edit in the whole show every single time. I don't know if you edit it out of the video version.
No.
So anybody who's...
I'm hoping at some point people are just going to take it as like a drinking game. And every time Alex knocks his mic into his face, you've got down your drink.
I mean, it's only once every pod, so at least we're encouraging safe drinking.
Yeah. Unless it's like absinthe or ethanol.
Good point, yeah. Just a pint of petrol.
Yeah. You
seem to have a very interesting beverage container there.
I was thinking last Friday, I'm a bit skint this month, but I do fancy a little whiskey. So I'm going to go to the shop and buy a cheap but perfectly serviceable bottle of whiskey. And I went to bought it, and I remember thinking, right,
what price can get you a serviceable bottle of whiskey? I mean, what's the lowest price that can get you?
I mean, if we're being realistic here, for me, it's about £30. But I was going, no, I think I'll go for about. I remember back in the day when I lived in Gourdon on my own, when I was actually poor, not just a bit skint, and I used to, if I wanted to have a drink and a game of Overwatch, it would be Jameson whiskey I would drink, because it's not a good whiskey, let's not pretend it is, but it's perfectly fine. So I was like, I remember not hating that, so I thought I would buy it and roll back the years. But they had like an orange flavoured one. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Got it home, realised it was some weird, not whiskey. It's like 30% not into the 40s, which you would expect, and the orange flavouring is powerful, so it's not quite a liqueur, but it's definitely not a whiskey. So I've added it to lemonade. But to sort of bring this home, so there's like a food festival in Aberdeen every year called...
Sounds like I would drink that drink, by the way.
It's all right. So I've added it to lemonade, and it's perfectly fine. So I was at Taste of Grampian, and Brewdog, which is like a food festival in Aberdeen every year, and Brewdog were there, and rather than give out plastic cups, they were giving out pints of, and the glasses are canned. So if I knock on for the listener, it's like a can, but a pint glass. That they
it looks really cool. Yeah, I like it,
and I've kept it, and I just quite like drinking out of it. So that's your story for Brewdog and rubbish Irish whiskey for the evening.
I see that they made some statement about the World Cup, didn't they?
Yeah, talking about how bad it was, and they're
not supplying beer or something.
Is that right? I think it was
or are they?
Yeah. So their statement was like, "Oh, we hate inequality, and we want to stand up for people's rights and stuff. So we're going to release this beer, and any profits from this beer we're going to give to some charity to promote people's human rights." And then people realised that they were one of the chief sponsors for alcohol in Qatar. So
that's what I thought, yeah.
Brewdog being Brewdog. Everything they do, all their punk is entirely, a bit like Johnny Rotten, their punk is entirely branding, it's not real.
It's philanthropic punk.
Yeah.
Philanthropunk. That's what they are.
So yeah,
good beers though. Good beers.
Yeah, I think. What am I drinking? I think that's where you have to draw the line, isn't it? If you're looking for your morals from a private company, you're looking for your morals in the wrong place. So let's say
that effectively sell a poisonous drug. So
exactly,
their morals aren't exactly in the clouds as it starts.
No,
but anyway, speaking of
what are you got on the go?
Purveyors of liver killing. I'm drinking some London Beer Factory Jungle Trip, which was the cheapest pale ale I could get from Tesco. It was under £3 for one can, so I felt like that was all right.
Yeah, I've got some...
And it is quite a nice New England pale ale. hazy tropical citrus, all the shit that they always put in these beers that make them all taste the same.
A selection of craft beers for my birthday, and I've not quite made my way through that yet, so I've still got some downstairs. I keep meaning to think, it's podcast night, I should have a beer, and then I go and do something else instead.
If I ever come back with 1 or 2 beers, Rachel's like, I knew you were doing a podcast this week because you came back with a can of beer.
I think it's quite a nice thing, actually. I've kind of learned it off of you. It's quite a nice, relaxing. I like the idea of podcasts to be a bit conversational. So, like, in my head, this is us just sitting down having a chat about a game and a beer. It's quite nice. It's nice.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
We don't often belch that much as well. Well, me anyway. You're not always drinking the beers, but
no.
Don't ruin the audio experience. Speaking of belching, though, in today's game, Metroid Prime, those things that you shoot and then they turn into a platform. They come out of lava and they're like a big gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sound effect for them was like everybody from the Retro Studios team who was around that day burping as loudly as they could.
Oh, really?
And then like slowed down and reversed and stuff.
Great little tidbit of information.
Yeah. What a day at work that would have been.
Here, mate, come over here and get paid to burp into a microphone.
Here, have a shot of this iron brew. Yeah. Do your worst.
Do the damage. You won't get it. Can you get iron brew down where you are?
Yeah.
You can.
And iron brew, what is it, extra?
Okay, so do you get...
Let's go do that.
So that you get up here, I don't know if you get it down with you guys, but you get obviously iron brew, you get iron brew extra, which is like the Coke Zero equivalent of iron brew. You do get the odd diet iron brew.
That seems to have largely fallen off the face of the earth.
But you also get up here, it's like iron brew, I don't know what they call it, but it's like iron brew original recipe. And it sort of appeared, remember when the sugar tax came in? Or do you get that in England, or is that a Scottish only thing?
Yeah. No, that's here.
When that sort of appeared, and it is like OG iron brew, like full sugar, and it's pretty expensive. It's got like the old school branding on the front, and I've never had it. I'm sure I would just feel my teeth rot as soon as I put it to my lips.
Somebody did tell me that iron brew got bought out or something. It got bought by some American company, and it's not as nice as it used to be or something. Or they changed the recipe. Something like
the recipe in
sugar tax. They changed the recipe, and then people don't like it as much anymore.
Yeah, they changed the recipe alongside the.
I think it's maybe it's Cadbury by an American company. Maybe I'm getting that mixed up. I think that was Kraft, wasn't it? Bought them.
Bar would be the company that make iron brew, but I googled bar drinks and I'm getting a lot of Dr. Pepper, so could be. Who knows? It will forever be unknown. But yeah, you get bar cola. There's bar lemonade, limeade.
Bar do a good cream soda.
They do. Ginger beer,
which goes good with your Kahlua.
Cream soda and Kahlua. Yeah, it's
really good, man. It's really good.
That is a combination.
It's called a summertime, according to the official Kahlua marketing.
A summertime.
Yeah, a bit lazy, but there we go.
Yeah,
it's not summertime right now though. It's dark and dingy November, and that's why we're headed off to a dark and dingy, isolated, ruined planetscape.
Hey, at least there's
with
warm
Samus
parts of
Aran.
This planet. I would like to know about the geology of this planet, given that there's there's an area that has a lot of snow and ice in close proximity to an area that has heavy, copious amounts of lava going about. How does this? They must have some. I don't know. Like,
do volcanoes not have snow on them? Just to play devil's advocate there.
When they're not erupting, they would.
Yeah, are we in it? Is that why?
I don't know.
What's it? Magma. It's a cavern, isn't it? It's a cavern.
Yeah.
Full of lava. And then there's the sort of tundra area.
I mean,
it's very Nintendo, isn't it? It's very fire area, ice area.
It's also
kind of a sandy area.
I guess, again, to play devil's advocate alongside you, it's unclear how fast and how far those lifts go. So you could
and where?
Yeah, you could be very far apart, I guess.
True.
To be fair to the old Metroid.
There's one Metroid, and I don't know if it might be Other M, or it might be Fusion, and I can't remember which one it is. But there is one Metroid where basically you're on board a space station that's running various simulations, and therefore that's how they get away with it being like a jungle area, an ice area, while you're just on a ship.
Yeah. Okay.
So they kind of make it a believable way for it to be vastly differing landscapes within a 2-minute walk of each other.
Can you explain to me the thinking behind calling this series Metroid? Because it's, unless I'm missing something, the Metroids always, and they're not, it's just I've obviously never picked it up in the story, but the Metroids just seem like a bit of an annoying enemy that appear at some point throughout the game. They're not the main enemy, are they? Like, that would be Ridley. And they're not, well, they're not good, are they? They're kind of enemy. Well, there's one good one in Super Metroid, I guess. But then they're mostly bad.
Or for the little baby one from
Super Metroid.
Do you see the baby in Super Metroid?
There's that good one that sort of saves your life in Super Metroid.
Yeah, that must be it then, because she basically wipes them out in Samus Returns, except for the baby one. So this is after Metroid 1, before Metroid 2, that's apparently.
Right. Apparently. Yeah, it's just an odd... it's an odd...
So, obviously there's the meme, isn't there? Have you seen the meme of, like, why can't Metroid crawl? That's a meme, apparently. Where it's a picture of Samus and someone's like, why can't Metroid crawl?
Yeah, she's got to ball up every time she wants to get through a hole.
Yeah, but apparently Metroid is a portmanteau of Metro and Android. I guess Metro to be playing into the fact that you're, searching loads of rooms, following a map, taking lifts. I don't know, but that's what it stands for. That's where it gets its name from.
Okay. So do you think it's just coincidence then that just let's call and then because that'd be to me that's like calling the Super Mario series Goomba. Or
well, originally it was going to be called Space Hunter.
Nah.
And
especially because in the 2 Metroid games I've played, I've not spent any time in space playing the game. There's maybe been space, like as in the ship flying through space, but I've not been in space.
Good point. We're just on a planet to be on Earth.
I guess that's also another weird thing I want to bring up. Sorry, I keep derailing your chat, but like, she is ostensibly a pirate hunter, isn't she? So my assumption is she spends a lot of time, her job being flying around space, taking on pirate ships. So in the 2 full Metroid games I've played now, she's never done her job once, really. She just spends a lot of time on a planet. I guess there are these pirates on the planet, but you've got to think that the main sort of thrust of her job is to fly, find pirate ships, and shoot them.
Yeah, she follows a lot of she follows a lot of signals, and then I guess goes in for a bounty. She's like, it's like Alien again, isn't it? Just distress signals, off she goes.
Looking for bounties. She's going to be upset to find that they are no longer in chocolate boxes now. What is it, Heroes that we've taken the bounty out of?
Well, I got a box of Celebrations at the weekend that's got bounties in it.
Oh, well, you're going to have to get on the BBC then. The BBC are reporting that they're removing bounty because apparently 75% of people don't want them.
I love bounty.
Aye.
Of all kinds, but mainly those.
Mainly the eating bounties. Secondly, you moonlight.
The pirate ones.
Well, you daylight as a normal 9-to-5 man, then you moonlight as a podcaster, and then you moonlight your moonlight as a pirate hunter.
Midnight as a pirate.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So apparently, they would, for some reason they don't really explain it in this article I'm looking at here. It just says we attached Android to the Metro subway, and that's how we got Metroid. And then Sakamoto, who's the original director, said that before that it was called Space Hunter, and then the other guy says Samus is a bounty hunter, but they didn't have enough time to change the instruction manual, so apparently it calls her a space warrior or space hunter in the first game's manual.
Do we need to then go a level deeper and Google the origin, the etymology, so to speak, of the Metro name, the word Metro? Etymology of metro. So it means metropolitan, right? I don't know.
Well, they're talking about a metro subway. So again, I think it's just because it's in tunnels and you have to.
Yeah, so that'd be it's an early.
Because why is metro called metro?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Metro is an early 20th century French abbreviation.
No, I mean the game Metro.
Metropolitan Railway. Oh, don't know.
Why the Metro game's called Metro 2044?
That's what I'm getting at. I don't know why they're making the leap. I get the Android sort of.
Yeah.
I get that side of it. I don't understand why. Was someone in a metro and they just thought it sounded quite good? I guess it does sound cool.
He's saying metro subway, so why are they thinking of that in terms of... Because he's not on a subway.
No. Maybe it's just the tunnels, perhaps, are akin to a metro.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think I'm going to...
But it is a cool name. Metroid is a cool name.
I'm going to land with you. Because your other one is... metro from metra, which is medical English via New Latin ancient Greek meaning uterus, which again is more tubes.
Well, there's the mother brain in this, isn't there?
Yeah, right, we've nailed it. We've checked that off the list. Next.
Yeah, done. Sorted. Well, we'll also have to state the obvious to everybody, but we are in the time of celebrating the 20th anniversary of this.
We are.
Fine video game, as it was released on the 18th of November.
3 days away.
Yeah, this should be out on the day of the anniversary to get that glorious search engine optimization.
If you make that, what a hero.
Yeah, 18th of November 2002. So 20 years ago, maybe today,
what were you
dear
doing in
listener.
2002, Alex?
Not playing Metroid Prime. I was probably playing a different game instead.
I was probably...
and also, I was in A-level, I think. Doing A-levels.
Got a vague memory of being in a computing class in secondary school. And we were talking about video games, and I'm pretty sure I would have been playing like the likes of Tony Hawk by this point, almost certainly. And everybody in our class had a PlayStation, and we're like, oh, PlayStations are the best. Or PS2 would have been by that point, wouldn't it? And there's one kid in the class,
definitely.
one kid in the class that had a GameCube that told us that it was better than both Xbox and PlayStation. And I remember just making fun of the poor lad for an entire period of that class. I'd like to go back to myself and say, hey, the GameCube's cool, man. And then I just walk out the room.
No, you don't. No, I don't think so. I think he'd probably liked for that to have stayed as it was, because those kind of console wars in the classroom they're precious memories. They are.
Yeah.
Oh, you're fucking PlayStation shit. Mine's got 64 bits.
I think I was also fresh out of because back in the old console wars days, I'm sure I had a PS1. Then decided, oh no, wait, I want GoldenEye. So I sold it so I could buy a Nintendo 64. And then ended up selling that again so I could go back to a PS1 again. I just couldn't make my mind up.
That's kind of like the opposite of me, where I had an N64. Went to a friend's house and played his Dreamcast. Had to have a Dreamcast. So threw an absolute hissy fit at my parents because they wouldn't let me get one. And then when I had my Dreamcast for a few months and realised Sonic Adventure was a bit wank, I was like, can't want to play GoldenEye again. So then my dad had to go out and get me another N64. Obviously I had to use trade-in value and pocket money and whatever.
I was fairly insulated from the Dreamcast era because I had one friend that had a Dreamcast, and my sort of exposure to that was 3 games. That would have been Shenmue, that would have been Toy Commander, and that would have been Crazy Taxi. Toy Commander and Crazy Taxi I really enjoyed. But when you're a young kid, Crazy Taxi, I think was starting... It was obviously an arcade game, so to me it was starting to feel a bit... I wouldn't buy a console for it, put it that way. And my friend wouldn't let me play Shenmue because apparently you could only have one save or something like that or he was just being a dick and wouldn't let me play
I think
it.
he was mugging you off. Maybe he'd saved up all of his VMU with bullshit choo-choo rocket.
It was the one game I wanted to play and he wouldn't let me play it. So I just played a lot of Toy Commander, really, until later years where I started playing a bit more when it became a bit more readily available.
Yeah, I think I probably had Sega Rally and I definitely had Sonic Adventure. But I'm really not sure what else. But I definitely remember getting a GameCube it would have been early 2002, I think, where my dad found one for £50 in Argos because it had already tanked that bad in the UK that they just got rid of all their stock. And my dad bought me an X-Display model. Got it basically brand new for £50.
I think I've asked you this. It still works.
Well,
does it?
I assume so.
Yeah.
I've never got rid of it. It's never not worked, but I haven't played it for a while. Since when you get a Wii, you don't bother anymore, do you?
No. My assumption with the GameCube is that being an expert display model, it probably sat in a box with the power on and maybe a disc in there playing like the intro credits over and over again,
probably.
or like the demo disc over and over again. So like, my worry with that would be.
I don't know if they had necessarily it was a big enough Argos for that to actually have happened. I think it was probably just sat in a cabinet.
Should have known.
I need to go back and ask my dad. Be like, mate, did you buy me one that was playing demos? Because that's irresponsible. Or did you just get one that was in a fancy case just to look shiny for people? Because I've got the black one. I've always wanted to get the purple one as well, and I quite always want the orange
What's
GameCube.
It called? Sunset Orange.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd quite like one of them. They keep popping up on Saw Thumb. They do. I saw them at the London Gaming Market on Sunday. Chatted to them for quite a while. Yeah, bought quite a lot of games off of them. I went back a second time and bought more. I got that from them.
That is that is a stunning box.
And I tell you what, as well. Speaking of stunning boxes, if they'd had Metroid Prime, I was going to get it for you, but they didn't. But the Japanese GameCube boxes are beautiful. They're like sort of that big, so probably almost the size of my phone, I'd say. They're really tiny because the discs are tiny, so they kind of kept on like that. They are cardboard as well, though, so not proper DVD cases like we had over here.
Do you think?
But they had Resident Evil 0 there, and they had Mario Sunshine, but I couldn't quite justify it.
So back in the old days when our winner is you was a newly formed babe. I was going to say
suckling at his mother's teat,
but it's out of the womb. Yeah. We did a thing. I'm not sure. I'm sure it was a joint thing. I'm not sure now. Actually, you could correct me if you remember. But there was definitely a blog post that went up on our winner is you.co.uk or whatever it was at the time.
I think it was a winnerisuk.com.
That was it, because the winner's you was gone, or it wanted like £2,000 for something or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did that. There was a blog post looking at covers, and the UK/Europe definitely got better box art than like America and stuff like that.
Yeah, we did like a box art battle thing. I definitely remember. I don't know if we actually put that out, but I know that was planned because the
one I
Resident Evil 4 is one of the worst examples of the Americans getting shafted and ours being a piece of art.
Resistance 3 is another one because Ollie Moss did the cover of the European Resistance boxes.
Is that like the orange one with the... Is it orange?
In my head, it's white and it's a skull. And the sort of
it's definitely a skull. Yeah,
are made up of the city where the game takes place.
Did we get something to do with that from a
Infamous is another one that was really bad. Yeah, I think you're right. Infamous was another one that was really bad. But yeah, so maybe where I'm going is to close the loop. Maybe that's the one thing we did get gypped on, because I much prefer American PS1 box cases to the PS1 box cases in the UK. Based purely because if I've got a PS1 game and the box is broken, I can just buy a CD and replace the box. Whereas you cannot get replacement boxes. Your only route to PS1 replacement boxes is to buy old FIFA games and get rid of the contents of the FIFA.
That's true. Yeah, proprietary boxes can be a bit of a pain in the arse for sure. Especially if they're cardboard.
But yeah, it sounds like it was
Resistance 3, so yeah, I think we did get something to do with that at one of the expos we've been to.
I'm sure I had posters, so maybe I've never
played any of the Resistance games.
I played the first. I've played them all briefly. I've not completed any of them, but they are frustrating in that the premise behind them is utterly fantastic. It's right up my street. It's like World War II history meets alternate history in alien invasion. But the game sucks. It just sucks. I think people that think it's good, I'm probably about to upset some people that actually like the game, but my impression of it always was that people that thought it was good just had a PS3, they didn't have an Xbox, and they were just clinging on for dear life to have a shooter that meant something on that console.
Or an exclusive, yeah.
Yeah.
A reason to not play 360 like the rest of the world.
Because the 360 was the shooter console, wasn't it, of that generation?
Yeah. And Resistance is the one that is Resistance the lying game where they had that video at E3 that was not the game at all. Is that one?
I don't know.
The one where they had like all the dudes on a gunship and they all kind of get off and it looked amazing, and then that was just a demo.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Like a CGI cutscene.
There was a controversy of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they check out the graphics of the PS3, and then the actual game was nothing like it.
Hey, did you ever order that? Speaking of, because we're talking about shooters, did you ever order that first-person shooter bitmap?
I'm hoping it's still available because I am fresh out of. I've got another trip to Edinburgh to do this weekend, and I am fresh out of spare cash until I get paid. So
I see. Yeah.
I'm hoping it's
so I
still
got
available.
Mine arrived today and has they have an interview with Randy Pitchford in there.
Oh no!
Don't know why they thought that was worth anybody's time.
Oh, Randy.
I have no idea what he's going to be talking about. Randy Pitchford
is given he's been a bit weird. I'm not sure he could have had a worse name.
Well, I'm going to give you an alternative. I'm going to give you another option, an option B.
Okay.
And that is a man named Jeff Spangenberg. And
what's he got up to do?
He was I believe, the head of Retro Studios when they first were created from the ashes of, I believe, Acclaim.
Okay.
Or Iguana, sorry. Do you remember Iguana?
They weren't. Who made Gex?
That would be too convenient if they made it. Iguana. So they were created in 1998 by an alliance between Nintendo and Iguana Entertainment founder Jeff Spangenberg. Iguana made.
What's your T-shirt, by the way?
Air.
Oh yes, that's one of your better ones.
Pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Good old Dracula bite. Such a great place to buy video game shirts from. Right, so they made stuff like NBA Jam, apparently.
Okay. I think you need to, next time I visit, we need to sit down and you need to explain to me why I need to like NBA Jam. Because I didn't give it the time of day when we were at that arcade place in Leeds.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I will. I remember me and my friend Grant used to play that in Aberdeen together. We used to play the Xbox 360 game together, and we were terrible. We could never even beat the computer. I think we tried to play online for a bit as well, which was mad. Like sitting next to each other doing co-op online play. Anyway, yeah, Iguana. They made games like Forsaken, loads of sports games, South Park, Turok. So Jeff Spangenberg.
Turok is a potential future. I feel like a potential future.
They have remade that, or at least remastered it for the PS4, and I have both Turok and Turok 2 on my PS5.
Maybe that's the one. Turok's a game I've been.
I'm not fucking playing the N64 one again because the C buttons are forwards and backwards, and the analog stick is look around.
Oh my god!
Can't change it either.
Oh,
just the worst control scheme I've ever played in my life.
Oh well, we've got gold. We're talking about C buttons and moving about. I know it's inverted, but we've got GoldenEye to look forward to in the new year when they eventually.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do both of those, right? We'll do the Switch one, which is the N64 one in 1080p, and then we'll do the proper one.
Maybe it can be a double feature, but yeah, I am so GoldenEye is such a special game to me.
It is. It just needs that little bit of modernization, the way they did it for Perfect Dark, and it'll be golden again. Golden. Yeah. So Spangenberg sitting around, got his new company. Nintendo comes along and commissions them to make 4 games for the GameCube. One of them is an RPG called Raven Blade, which, well, spoiler alert, none of these 4 games exist. Another one was just called Action Adventure, but apparently it was actually called Metaforce. It had these 3 women in it, like female protagonists, and it was going to be like a third-person game, and they were supposed to be like really attractive because they decided that if you have to look at a character in third person, it needs to be a woman with a hot ass. So they made 3 of them.
I think I've got a group of mates that the Destiny bunch that would agree with that. Whenever it's a third person game and they get a character select, they'll always choose a female character for that specific reason.
Interesting.
Speaking of 2022,
yeah. Speaking of choosing a female, while Nintendo gave them all this money and time to make these 4 GameCube games, Jeff Spangenberg was just dicking about and
living the dream. Is what you're saying.
He was living a different dream to the one that they hoped he would live, because he was actually making softcore porn films on Nintendo's dime. And apparently, they found that they were actually timestamped, like when he was supposed to be working at Retro on the games for Nintendo. He'd actually timestamped his porn films that he made, that he was in, with their money. So, yeah, they found out, and they were not very happy at all. So they sacked him. And then they sent Miyamoto over there to kick some ass.
That's really, really funny. And I'm fully on board with that kind of shithousery. There is about like 10% of me thinking, like, the amount of time we've dedicated to this industry for free, like, don't waste your chance, man. If you've been let loose to earn money doing this,
yeah,
you can go for it. Like, if you try and fail, fine. Don't not try. Although I guess if your hobbies are gaming and wanking, maybe you're winning in some sort of sense.
Yeah, I believe that.
Did he go on to starring a porno with Eric Cantona? Because then he's won.
He went. Are you familiar with the Guy game?
Don't think so. The Guy game. No.
So the Guy game is a disgrace of a video game, which Jeff Spangenberg was the director, producer, and one of the designers on. That is basically a shitty trivia game where you answer questions and then girls get their tits out.
Ah, okay. So maybe he didn't have any talent in the first place.
No, he's like the OG fucking
BM Triple X or whatever it's called.
Yeah, no. What's the guy who I said a minute ago? Randy Pitchford. So apparently, right.
The game left a porno USB behind in a.
Imagine if it was Spangenberg's softcore porn that was on there as well. Imagine if they'd actually like linked together.
Did you hear Randy Pitchford's excuse as well?
No. Was it not research or something? Was it?
Well, you know how he's mad into magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said that some of the tricks that these women were pulling off in this porn was like a magic trick. So he was
well, the old ping pong trick.
He wasn't spellbound by their vaginas, he was spellbound by their magic skills.
Well, their artistry of the dark arts. Yeah, so the main thing that people may know about the Guy game is that, yeah, you're watching footage. The fucking fly was just on my eyelash. You're basically just watching footage of girls in bikinis, right?
Oh,
and
God,
if you do well at the game, the girls get their tits out.
Oh my God!
Guess what the controversy was with this game, and why it had a lawsuit at the end. Guess.
It can't. I don't know. The font.
One of the girls was...
Oh, underage. Oh my god.
Correct.
I googled it here and I was like, well, the font of the Guy game looks a bit like the Family Guy font. Is that a thing? But no, underage. Excellent.
IGN gave it 7.7 out of 10, stating, "It may be tasteless, but I prefer this kind of tastelessness over BMX XXX."
I mean, it's not trying to be anything else.
Unbelievable.
Really.
So that's what he went to do after he was outed from Retro Studios for making porn. He went and made porn in a game. See, I'm doing it for a game this time. Can't find me now.
Oh
Fucking
my
twat.
goodness.
What a twat. So yeah, after that, Nintendo were fucking very, very angry. And they were impressed by this metaverse game.
Nintendo wrath.
So they forced Retro Studios to cancel all the 4 games they were making and just use the engine they'd created for this metaverse game for Metroid Prime. But they made it first person instead of third person, and there was a guy there called John something, or Whitehall, I think, or something like that.
It must have
and he basically, I guess so, yeah. But the problem is that then Nintendo announced the GameCube, and this John Whitehall guy, who was like the lead designer, thought that it was a piece of shit that was underpowered, and he quit.
Okay.
He literally quit Retro Studios because Nintendo's GameCube was a lunchbox with a handle on it.
I mean, it was.
He hated it that much that he just upped and left.
So
Miyamoto had quite a lot of involvement in this. He changed apparently the control scheme, forced them to make it first person. And there's something about like they mistranslated something that he said, where he said like what they translated it as like, what if Samus had a bug's head?
Okay.
And they were like, what the fuck are you on about? We're not going to change her head. But what he was actually talking about was the visor stuff. Like, can she have different types of vision like a bug would have?
Yeah, okay.
So that's where all the visors and stuff came from. But yeah, he was really big for the ball to be in there as well. And I got a quote where somebody was like, well, apparently Miyamoto and Nintendo really didn't give a shit about Metroid, which is why they gave it to
I think Nintendo continues to not give a shit about Metroid, to be fair.
Yeah, certainly until the Switch, they absolutely didn't. So apparently one of the quotes is like, oh, they didn't care if we killed this franchise by doing it so badly. So when Nintendo...
Weirdly.
They didn't, no, exactly. And they hadn't done one on the N64 because they were basically afraid they couldn't make something as good as Super Metroid. Which we all know sold badly when it came out, because I think Donkey Kong Country pissed all over it in terms of sales.
That's right.
And the PlayStation probably. So they'd had that gap, and then once they gave this trailer out at E3 for when the GameCube was launching, they had a trailer for Metroid. It's nothing like the actual game, but apparently there was so much buzz that Nintendo were like, oh, okay. So no one's buying it, but apparently everybody wants to play it. So that's why they actually got Sakamoto, the original Metroid designer, director, whatever, who'd done Super Metroid. They got him to go work on Metroid Fusion for the GBA, so he could do what he was used to doing, the 2D side-scrolling stuff. And then it launched basically the same time as Metroid Prime on the GameCube.
I wonder if this sort of makes me think about. I was sort of like before we started recording this podcast, I was sort of trying to jot down some notes and sort of my standout thoughts of this game, and I'll basically just write. I mean, this is a lot of garbled nonsense, but I will try and pull it together into something to make sense. But like, it's interesting that you say that they were worried that they couldn't make a sort of a worthy successor to Super Metroid, which is why they didn't do it on the N64. Because to me, this game very much feels like a sort of faithful recreation of Super Metroid, but in a 3D environment in first person. So like when you look at the weapon suit, the add-ons, a lot of the weapons that you had in Super Metroid are the same in returning or built upon off that sort of foundation. The suit, the same thing. That a lot of the music crossovers and goes from like what do you call it, like sprite music to CD music, but it's the same thing. Like when you get a new power, it's the same noise that the game makes, I'd say even like the gameplay. What else have I got? Like when the game starts, you've got to sort of escape from a burning, like a place that's fallen apart, that's blown up. Then you start off with all your powers, then you lose them, then you end up on a different planet and have to slowly regain your abilities. To me, it just it felt very much like a Super Metroid, but first person with better graphics and sort of reimagined. So that's interesting that you say that they thought, and maybe that's why. Do you think that it felt like they were almost terrified to step outside their box? So they did sort of, to an extent. I'm not saying they haven't beat for beat remade it, but they've sort of. This game to me feels like a modern Super Metroid rather than a new game.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it deserves a lot of credit for how they managed to actually sort of transpose that onto a first-person shooter. But apparently, I think a lot of that is to do with, again, Nintendo being really annoyed at them for fucking around. Apparently, they kept writing like 1,000-page gameplay documents and stuff. Yeah, they had to crunch pretty hard. They were doing 80 to 100-hour weeks, and they were constantly under Nintendo's watchful eye. So maybe they felt like they kind of had to follow that formula as closely as possible, lest they, or at least to just impress them, to not lose the gig. Because like I was saying earlier, the morph ball stuff, Miyamoto was like really insistent that if they couldn't get that to work, then the game doesn't get made, and they were trying to avoid doing it. Yeah,
you're painting an interesting picture here. So, like, to sort of build upon that, obviously, you've got the sort of close adherence to the previous game, obviously in a much different environment. But the other thing that when you're talking about that jumped to mind was, and I'm trying to remember because I sort of lost my thought. What did you just say, Alex?
To do with the morph ball stuff and Nintendo making them do it.
Yeah, so like when I'm thinking about like Nintendo over the last, 20 years or so, have been notoriously reticent or cautious when it comes to lending out their IP to different companies. So like obviously like we see like with this stuff, and obviously they made a mess of it. We both read a book. It was the one with, it was at Console Wars, in which Nintendo wouldn't let, or didn't want to let, a non-Japanese company make a game based on their IP.
That sounds right.
It was a while until they started doing that, and then obviously the Nintendo movie that was a bit of a disaster. And then you look at Nintendo now, and it's almost like this is like over 20 years has gone by, and we start seeing like Netflix are now starting to dabble with that new Nintendo or Mario TV show. There's the Mario movie coming out,
which is completely full of American like big name actors and whatever. They're not sticking with their their tried and tested Mario people. They're going straight Hollywood with it.
Ubisoft have now started with the Rabbids Mario crossover games. It's almost like they were being so badly burned by these bad experiences with developers and movie, and just sort of allowing their IP to be shepherded by a different company and different heads, that they're only now just sort of, the burns are sort of healed enough, and they've saw enough, like the Sonic movies being successful, that like, right, maybe we can try these things again. It's interesting, and I wonder if this is like another sort of notch in the bedpost of Nintendo being scared off lending their IPs out for decades upon decades. It's an interesting thought that you've just poked into my brain.
Yeah, because I was trying then to think of Western developers that have actually had anything to do with Nintendo properties in the past, and there's probably a list somewhere that you could easily find. But off the top of my head,
the one that jumps to mind is
well, Rare was obviously the first one where they gave him Donkey Kong, and then Retro may have been the second Western developer that they were trying to get into, because they saw that American development was really ramping up in that era because Xbox had just come out. Sony had gotten a lot of the Japanese third-party support from the PlayStation era, moving into obviously now PlayStation 2 and whatever. So they still have people like Square who are still making Final Fantasy for them and not Nintendo anymore. And then if I think about stuff like what else they've let out in the past, they've let out like F-Zero to Sega, which is Japan, Zelda to Capcom, which is also Japan. So yeah, I never really thought about how little they sort of trusted that wing of the development industry.
It's also a shame as well because is like traditionally poorly as the Metroid games have sold over the years. It's still a very much loved IP, and if they were willing to sort of let the reins off it a little bit, there are companies that would have made Metroid games. I mean, look at like Castlevania is another Metroid-like game that we played, and that is like one of the most beloved games of all time. And that came sort of, I don't know, what that would have been around about the time of this game. Would it have been? That would be late 90s. I would think like.
It was probably about 95 because it was PlayStation 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That Castlevania. So yeah.
So I'm just thinking.
But if you want to look at the trajectory of those two franchises that were very similar for one part of time, around the 16-bit, 32-bit days, and then when you go to 3D translations of those two, Castlevania has never got anywhere close to what Metroid's done.
I'm just thinking of all the sort of Metroidvania games that have come out over the last decade, and to me, like, in hindsight, and again, maybe I'm over-egging this a little bit, I probably am, but I think it still illustrates my point that, like, it's almost like people were so hungry for another Metroid game that they eventually just thought, Nintendo aren't going to let us do it. Nintendo aren't going to do it. We're just going to go off and do stuff for myself. So then you get stuff like Guacamelee, you get Ori and the Blind Forest, you get... there's one that I'm trying to think of that Axiom Verge is the other one that jumps out in my brain. Like these are all like companies that you could have probably given that IP to that could have made a fantastic game.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't because they were... I guess the more we do these podcasts, the more I sort of understand why they would feel burned.
Yeah.
I also want to, before we move on, sorry Alex, one that I just want to make sure that I get in here. You were talking about, who's the guy that you said left because he thought the GameCube was too...
I think it's John Whitehall. Let me just double check his name.
So while you're doing that, this kicked loose a memory in my head that... I mean, like peek behind the curtain viewers.
John Whitmore, sorry, John Whitmore.
Peek behind the curtain viewers. We were a bit late in recording this. We just couldn't make our schedules line up. But obviously, we're here now. And it kicked loose. I was doing some research prior to a pod recording that didn't go ahead. Do you know that? So I think it's while you're on the underwater sections of the game. You know, you've got that fish that sort of splits itself in half, and it makes your vision go all fuzzy.
Yes.
So that was, I don't know if you know this, Alex, but that was originally, they had different textures that were going to create like the stuff that happens visually in that game when that happens. But the game and the engine and the power of the consoles at that time were struggling to make it look nice, and the textures that they could use looked rubbish. So actually, when you go into that section and you're experiencing that in the game, apparently... And I'll need to go back and look at it closely, but apparently actually what the game does there is literally shows you the game's code as it's running.
Really?
Yeah, because
it
looks interesting, it makes the game look distorted, and it makes it look like there's interference going on.
Yeah.
They just were able to sort of use the power. They couldn't. They lacked the power to put a texture in, so rather than put textures in that looked rubbish, they just literally let you see behind the curtain and see the game code running. Which is really interesting.
That is wicked.
Yeah. Huh. I'll take a note of it and I'll look it up and I'll put a post on Twitter to let people see it. Because it will be visible somewhere. Anyway, I
think that's probably the development.
I think so.
Done. So you've got your notes.
How was the game received at the time?
Oh, amazingly well.
I'm
pretty sure it won a lot of Game of the Years. It sold like 2 million pretty quickly. And yeah, the critical acclaim was so massive that obviously Nintendo then have trusted retro studios from then on. They're still making Metroid. They've made the Donkey Kong, excuse me. They made the Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze. So they've been handed another Nintendo IP and have knocked that out of the park as well. So they're a pretty revered developer at this point. I don't know what the state of their opinion of them is at the moment, considering Metroid Prime 4 was announced so long ago and has had so little of an update about it. And they've had to I'm pretty sure the only thing I can remember being said about it is that they scrapped the entire thing and started again. So there's obviously something going on there, issues-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a COVID thing, I don't know.
It still sits at about 97 on Metacritic, so it's got.
That's
one of the best games of all time, really.
Yeah.
Does it sit? If you were to make a top 10 list, does it make your top 10 games of all time?
I wouldn't. Maybe not my top 10, but it's certainly my favourite Metroid game that's ever been made. And I don't think it lost anything from this time around me playing it. I think this is actually the first time I've ever beaten the game on the GameCube. I
really?
had the game on the GameCube. I'm pretty sure I bought it quite early on in my GameCube owning life, and I started playing it, and I just got a bit bored. I had no prior history with the Metroid series, because back when the SNES was around, I had Mega Drive instead. And then I got an N64, which, as we've already discussed, there was no Metroid game made for that. So at this point, I'd had no history with it. So I played it for a little bit. I think I got up to probably the ice part, and then just never went back to it. And I actually went to play the game properly on the Wii in the Metroid trilogy, whatever it is, Metroid Prime trilogy, where they redid the controls for a Wii remote. And I was trying to play that way around this time as well, just to get a differentiation between me and you.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get my Mayflash bloody Wii remote adapter to work on my PC, so I just went back to Dolphin and played the GameCube version. I can't remember how differently it. The one thing I did notice when I was looking at clips, because a lot of people seem to use clips from the Wii version, is that you could flick when you're in a ball mode. You could flick the Wii remote up and it would jump.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually have to use bombs to fire yourself into ledges or little nooks and crannies and stuff. You would just straight up flick it and jump around. So they added that on there, and obviously you were aiming the cursor with the Wii remote rather than. I suppose you still did lock on, but yeah,
that sounds like a better way to play it.
I definitely remember playing it. I'm pretty sure I played all three of these games on that Metroid trilogy with Simon, and I do remember him seeming to suggest that it was better on the Wii than it was on the GameCube for him to control, because there is no aiming really in this, is there? It's just walking around, stand still and aim, or lock on.
It's mostly that's basically fine. I think for me, I did get into the point where I was sort of using or controlling the game without really thinking about it, which I think is what you ultimately want. You don't want to feel like you're constantly having to think of, how do I do this? How do I do that? And you do sort of get into a flow with it, because that's to me, that's always the worry when you're playing older games that have control methods that have been sort of usurped by different, as it evolves. And I got to the point that I think, like I was saying, the only time I really felt like I was sort of struggling with it is there's times where they would have enemies above you, and you'd be trying to move to avoid getting shot, but then to actually aim, you'd have to stop, pull the trigger, look up, lock on, and then you were off to be able to do your dodge.
Yeah, it's exactly as you're saying. It's that bit where you have to get your cursor ready to be able to lock on. That, and I had that issue sometimes with the grappling hook, where I was trying to jump and grab that, and if I'm trying to jump towards it, it would quite frequently go out of my vision, and I couldn't look up to get it, because she can't look up, because I have to hold the right trigger down to have a look up, and it wouldn't combine those two things together. I think obviously Miyamoto had a lot to do with that, because I think the lock-on was entirely his idea. He changed the control scheme around apparently, and they couldn't get it. Retro couldn't quite get it to be natural feeling enough. So this was, for some reason, their potential compromise. I mean, for a long period of time, I remember saying to you, the C-stick does absolutely nothing. But obviously, it changes the weapons that we find out once you actually get them.
It changes the weapons, but slower than I would like to. And I'm assuming it's just maybe just a RAM issue with the console. But I felt like there was some times where I would be moving about, and I'd be need to quickly change, and if you're changing the way, in today's modern day, the equivalent is the D-pad for changing stuff.
Well, I was going to say to you just then that I frequently kept pressing that to change weapons, and would end up putting a bloody X-ray vision over myself and getting totally lost.
To me, it's just the C buttons just weren't quite they worked fine, and I never felt like the gate like I died because of it, or I really took too much damage for it. But it was a very deliberate thing. I couldn't just like flick it down and he'd quickly change and flick it up to quickly change if you saw an enemy. To me, I would like see a purple enemy, and if they were far enough away, I could change. But if they were coming at me, you would hide, change, then jump out, and it was just that sort of one extra thought. And I guess that's why game controls improve and adapt over the time, and they sort of ironed that out. But and I realize I'm ultimately nitpicking a game that I think actually for its time controlled remarkably well.
There can't be too many games out there that control in the same way. It feels almost one of a kind in that regard, that it's got this single stick way of moving, but it's also got a free aim that you have to stand still, but it's got a lock on at the same time, and then you've got the transition into the morph ball, which then goes third person, and then you get all this weird freedom in a third person view, but then you flick back up to first person again. It's really unlike anything else in the way that the whole thing is put together and how the player interacts with it.
So when the GameCube came along, that would have been intersecting with sort of the birth of Call of Duty and stuff like that. Are there any GameCube games that try to use the C stick as a stick in first person shooters?
There must be. I would imagine things like.
There may
Although now I'm thinking about it, because I remember we played Medal of Honor, and that was a standstill and aim job, and so. Oh no! I think maybe that did work with the C stick. You could move around like that, but I think to properly aim down sights, they would actually have to then stand still.
But it wasn't like you would expect the right stick to function in 2022. It functioned in a sort of halfway between old school and new school. Maybe that's as close as it gets.
Because I know Resident Evil 4 was definitely a standstill aim, use the same stick as movement to aim. The second Metroid game would definitely have controlled the same way. There must be some out there, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any. Of like a glut of first-person shooters that were on this console.
If you think of any, tweet us at WinnersUPod. I think that's what we are on Twitter.
Yeah.
Let us know, because I do want to know that. Do you mind if I take a pee break before?
I need to do that as well.
We move on. Am I recording? Yeah, I'm recording again. Okay, we've been kind of talking about it, but I guess it's time to talk a bit more about the gameplay.
Yes.
For me, this game is obviously, like we've spoken about before, it's a first person shooter, but to me, this feels more like a puzzle game. I don't know how you feel about it. And maybe
they certainly wouldn't let it be described as a first-person shooter. I know that for a fact. They would call it some sort of first-person action or first-person adventure game, something like that.
So
I mean, they don't even like Metroidvania as a genre. They like to call it search action, I believe, is what Nintendo like it to be known as. Yeah.
Why? Do you know why they end up calling it Metroidvania? Like what? Because to me, like
I don't know who coined that. I've got no idea where that actually came from.
I don't see what Vania necessarily brings to the table in that descriptor that doesn't already come with Metroid.
That's an interesting point.
Something to muse on.
I suppose Castlevania probably added RPG elements that Metroid doesn't have in terms of like equipping new items and leveling up and stuff. That's probably the only thing I could think of.
I think you've nailed that, because actually thinking about more modern Metroidvanias, they all have RPG elements, don't they? Sort of leveling up your abilities to an extent. Well, do they already? Yeah, I think it probably does. You can like level your life bar and stuff up. So anyway, yes, to me, like my standout moment isn't that the shooting is something that is obviously a big part of the game, but it's, for the most part, with a few exceptions, it's just, to me, it's something that has to be done. And I got to the point, and I'm sure you're meant to. I'm sure you did as well. You certainly did when I was watching you play. You got to the point where you would only engage enemies if you had to. So, like, if I went into an area I hadn't been before, I would definitely engage enemies and definitely shoot them. But after that, when you're back traversing other areas, I would just generally avoid the enemies unless I felt like I needed to. And I started off by...
I find that in every Metroid game, to be honest.
Yeah. I started off thinking, like, find them quite annoying. But I understand why they do it, because one, is good for replenishing your missiles and your health and stuff like that as you're playing, but also think how barren and lonely the game would be if they didn't repopulate the areas with enemies.
Yeah, there is no other... Well, I suppose they do have the crates lying around, but there isn't really like a standardized, plentiful way to regenerate ammo or
missile rooms
anything
are few
else.
Far between. I felt like
there's like two of them, maybe three at max.
Really weird.
Yeah, and I found that the game wasn't necessarily coded in a very helpful way to gauge what you had the least of and give you that. I don't know if that's an intent of theirs. It may not be. They may just think, well, fuck you, it's randomized. You get what you're given. But I found you and I have both had moments where we were desperate for, I don't know, super bombs or whatever, or missiles, and you're getting health when you've got full health. And I don't know if that's intentional or whether that's just not even factored into what the drops are. If it's completely random, I don't know. But it was quite annoying that that's the only way you can get it. So you have to sometimes go miles away from where the actual objective you were just at was. There's a bit that I don't think you did, because you get an optional weapon at the end of it, it's basically like an alternate fire for one of the other guns. It might be the plasma beam. You've got to climb this tower by shooting out parts of the columns with missiles. And there's so many of them. There's like four columns, so 4 blocks, because there's 4 columns, and then you have to do that like 3 or 4 times. So you're talking about, so 3 times each would blow up 1 block, and then there's like 3 or 4 of those. So you ended up needing about like 30 or 40 missiles. And you're also getting attacked by enemies that you can't defeat with anything but missiles. So yeah, I found that I had to keep running away from that time and time again to replenish missiles, and then would often not get missiles for ages, and it became a bit of the old standard, just sitting there grinding Metroid enemies for health or items.
I think I only had to do that once. You were watching at the time as well.
Yeah.
That's the only time I had to do that in that game, which is quite nice. I never really felt like I had to go back and grind. I could sort of muddle my way through with what I had. But yeah, like, to sort of link that back, is like my favourite part of this game was sort of figuring out what the game wanted you to do in the puzzles. So like, I loved the ball puzzles were fantastic. When you get this, my favourite power suit that resulted in like gameplay elements is it the spider morph ball?
Yeah.
Those morph ball puzzles were fantastic, some of them.
Yeah.
It's really fun to use, like balling yourself up walls, and then there's bit where you've got to like blow yourself up to different ledges or drop down onto different ones.
And sort of grab it on the way down. Yeah.
Really, really well done. That was by far and away my favourite part of the game, was when I got to be a morph ball for a bit.
Yeah. I think I must have had this discussion with you at the time when you were talking about it, but I feel like the platforming in this game is a lot better than the controls allow it to be.
Yes.
So if you could just look down at the platform you're landing on,
you saw me.
It would be so much more fluid.
Yeah.
I mean, there probably is something of an expectation that you will continually be going through these same areas, because that's the nature of this type of game. You're going to learn the feel of the area, and it will just, I said to you quite a few times, your movement's getting really smooth, and there is a satisfying feeling to that if you're just kind of bouncing around, double jumping, spinning sort of 180 in the air to kind of quickly and smoothly make your way through these environments. But just without that ability to actually see where you're landing, which has always really been a problem for first-person platforming. First-person platforming is almost like a dirty phrase in gaming, isn't it? Not a lot of people seem to have a lot of reverence for anything that did it in the olden days, like Turok and stuff like that. Duke Nukem Forever had some absolutely abysmal first-person platforming.
Do you think that's an old, at this point, outdated opinion that just has that, like, things have moved on? Because I still hear people moaning about first person platforming, but definitely I think it's I think it can be done well. Like I genuinely do. Like I think like it's like both you and I have got very many plentiful and often similar problems with games like Destiny, but like Destiny is an example of platforming to me that is done very, very well.
Yeah,
first person.
I enjoyed that very much.
Can be done.
Halo Reach did it quite nicely with the jetpack stuff, and obviously Apex Legends. We wouldn't be playing that if it wasn't fun to move around that world in first person.
No, that's true.
So, it obviously has its representation in 2022. But there is, the double jump in this game is so useful and can be used, and they want you to use it as much as possible because that's what a Metroid game was. 2D Metroid games, there was a lot of that going on. There's a lot of jumping and platforming going on, so they had to have that in this game as well as having the morph ball. So I think that to do it as well as that they did as a studio making their first game under all this pressure is really commendable. And with the tools that they now have to make Metroid Prime 4, I have really high hopes that it will actually be the sort of end goal of what they probably wanted it to be back then.
I hope they deliver.
Yeah,
I do hope they deliver.
Me too, desperately. And it's been so long since we heard anything. I'm not going to stick my neck out and say that they definitely will at this point.
No, I think it's just a case of wait and see at this point, isn't it? And
yeah,
I don't know. You're going to have to correct me and guide me on this. Like I've really enjoyed these Metroid games, but I'm not overly attached to the Metroid series. So like, and what I mean by that, like, is that I've really, really loved playing these two games, but the story hasn't necessarily gripped me. So if I can get the same gameplay enjoyment and gameplay loop from another franchise, I'm quite happy with that. And I feel quite comfortable looking around with like Guacamelee. We're going to have to do a Guacamelee game for this podcast. Ori and the Blind Forest. I think the Metroidvania genre is in quite a good place. So if this Metroid game's rubbish, is it this new one's rubbish? Is it? How upset are you going to be?
I'll be pretty upset because the Metroidvania genre has, I guess, been oversaturated, and then sort of people started to take a step away from it again, and it became very much an indie thing for a long time. There are no real Castlevania games going to come out. That's why Bloodstained or whatever it's called exists.
Mm-hmm.
But Metroid Prime is such a different beast. It's such a unique type of game where it's, as you say, it's like a first-person shooter, but it's more of a puzzle platforming exploration game that nobody else makes games like this. And if it's terrible, it just can't be terrible. It won't be terrible. The worst thing it would be is disappointing. But I would be very disappointed if this doesn't meet my expectations at the very least.
What's your favorite? So I've waxed lyrical about the ball puzzles.
Oh yeah, it's definitely that.
What's your favorite?
Yeah, it's got to be that. I mean, obviously, I love the upgrades that you get. Not necessarily always a fan of having to use the visors. I think they're more of a first kind of instance.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
You get to be like, oh, cool! Look how cool this is. They've got like night vision and X-ray vision, and then they're doing platforms that you couldn't see before, and you could only tell because you could see where the raindrops were hitting, like just bouncing off of thin air. But to actually use them was not necessarily all that fun. It was quite
I agree
obtrusive
with you.
to the gameplay at that point.
I think I found them quite irritating at some point.
Certainly for the boss fights towards the end, we have to switch between them.
But what I did appreciate about them was, and it was something that I never realised until you drew my attention to it, was that they use like in-game, I don't know, cues. So like they'll have bad lighting to help you get and to encourage you to use a certain visor. And I thought that was really, really smart game design that just went totally over my head for some reason.
Yeah, because I guess you just get the thermal vision, don't you? And then all of a sudden, all the lights go off, and there's all these enemies that are cloaking in and out and stuff. So it does try and force you to realise the kind of scenarios that you're going to need to use it in. I did remember seeing you play a dark section without using it at all at one point. I just thought he's obviously just fine in the dark, so he's all right.
I think we spoke about this on on stream. I got to the point where like I could genuinely felt like I could see just as well in the dark as I could if I used one of my the vision I was supposed to use. So I was just quite happy.
Yeah,
walking about.
And the only thing was the X-ray for those ghost pirates, where you have to use it, otherwise they just disappear. But if you use the X-ray, then they can't disappear anymore.
Yes,
that's the only time that's like a mandatory thing.
Talking of things I should have been doing in the game but didn't, I would be remiss if I didn't at least draw attention to the fucking scanning in this game.
Yeah. I think you didn't do the scanning.
I was just an idiot. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I was just a complete tool.
I mean, the scanning in this game is what is the meme that people talk about when they talk about this game. How you have to scan everything. It's just constant room, scan simulator.
Just do it.
yeah. And then there was, but it's it basically, this game follows the standard Nintendo formula of, certainly back in that era, of we're really not going to tell you any story at all here. It's all about the game and how it plays. And there's obviously a lot of environmental storytelling going on here, but the environmental storytelling you have agency over, because if you don't want to scan the environment, you don't learn the lore, or if you do, then you do it. Every enemy obviously you can get tips on how to defeat them. And basically the only story you're ever going to get is by reading the terminals with your scanner.
Which I think is interesting. I just want to draw attention to that. That was something that Doom was lauded for. The Doom 2019?
The 2016 one.
2016 Doom, yeah. People lauded it for that because it's like, it's just, people think it's just a run-and gun shooter, but actually if you read the terminals, it's got a really deep lore, which is fair enough. And actually I think that was the way to do it with a Doom game, because a lot of people come to Doom and they don't want to sit and watch cutscenes, they don't want to learn some mad story, but for people that are there and interested in it, it's there. So I think if we're going to praise Doom for that, just because this game came out in 2002, this game also deserves equal praise, because I would say a similar thing apply in that people aren't coming to this game necessarily for the lore, but there are people that like the lore, so it's there if you want to sort of discover it. And
yeah, absolutely,
it makes that a part of the game to sort of treasure trove the lore out of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the lore? Because it's not something I have to admit I sort of brushed over a lot of it. I understood space pirates, and that was about as deep as it went. Are you deeper in than that?
Probably not. No, I mean, I know that certainly the Prime series has all been focused around the Chozo, this race, this like ancient race of people who, these are the ones who leave all the lore and I believe developed all the tech. That Samus uses, and obviously the space pirates, they find this phazon stuff on Talon IV, which is I think why they're there. I believe they're there to try and sort of harness that to make super pirates.
Favorite space pirate would be when you would text me or send a message on Twitch while we were playing, that you'd walk into a room and there'd be one of these weird beasts that just look like a monster just standing at a computer terminal like it's doing
that was work. So funny. Yeah. Yeah, they look like total berserkers, but really they're these massively intelligent race that are really going deep on the science to try and defeat. They reverse engineer Samus's own weapons against her. It's just mad. But then they still just run at you and don't take cover behind anything. It's bizarre. Apparently the Chozo built this temple, the artifact temple that we go at the end of the game.
Ancient race. The Mass Effect forerunner.
Exactly. I would be very surprised if that probably wasn't one of their influences for that kind of thing, as an ancient race of druids or whatever that created all this advanced tech but have now since been wiped out. And apparently they are the ones that built this artifact temple to contain the Metroid Prime. That's not right. To contain the Metroid Prime, built this temple.
You got to I like that you got to do a power grab while you do it as well. You can
definitely. But yeah, you get all these artifacts that are hidden around. That's how you get there. They created them for some reason. Ridley also has an interest in it for some reason.
We've spoken about this before, but it slipped my mind. Why is robot / pterodactyl called Ridley. Is it anything to do with the Alien movies?
Interesting.
That's the only Ridley I've ever encountered. Ridley Scott, I suppose. Yeah.
Ridley, also known by his aliases Geoform 187 and the Cunning God of Death.
I wish they did that. Oh no, it's not Ridley, it's the Cunning God of Death. I like that way better.
Yeah, that is way better.
Ridley just sounds like someone you know down the pub, but is a pterodactyl.
It's named after Ridley Scott.
Okay, they just liked Ridley Scott.
Yeah, Yoshio Sakamoto's a massive fan of Alien, and it influenced him a lot for Metroid. Apparently, he became Samus Aran's arch nemesis after murdering her parents as he led a space pirate raid on her homeworld. So he's the leader of the space pirates.
How have we found ourselves here again? The second pod in a row that has got alien links to it. Because and now you're saying that they really like Ridley Scott, the Alien movies. There is a bit of the architecture that is like a family-friendly, sanitized version
Definitely.
of the Alien movies. What's his face? Old Scorny boy himself.
Oh, H.R. Geiger.
Yeah, it's like Disney meets H.R. Geiger is a lot of the art style to this game.
Yeah, and obviously you've got the Metroids acting as the face huggers in a way.
Yeah,
by sort of like landing on you and sucking out your life force.
Oh my god, we have kicked loose a stone here, Alex. They do. Yeah. They act like the face huggers.
Yeah.
They were a pain in the dick hole, I have to say. Especially they weren't really actually. There's like the evolved Metroid. He was a pain in the ass.
What, the very final boss?
No,
or the one with the tentacles on it.
You get the Metroid that you can sort of blast off with your explodey ball, and then there's one that is like a developed, or it's like an evolved Metroid that you can't do that, and you can either use a super missile on it, or you can use your like, what do you call it, like your like Nova bomb that goes off.
Yeah,
I got to the point where I would just enter a room if one of them came near me, I'd ball up Nova. I can't remember what it's called, Nova bomb, and then I just book out of there, and that was just basically how I entered the room. But I used up a lot of those doing that because I could not be bothered engaging with them.
You were a big fan of the using the ball to move quickly.
Oh,
so I'm not even sure what's the quickest method.
No,
but
it's the most fun method for me. I'm not joking. Like, being the ball was I would genuinely play a puzzle game that was just being the ball. Like, if they went, here's Metroid ball puzzle, I would play that because that was really
Am I chatting absolute shit? Is there a Metroid Prime pinball? Sure, I think there is.
Wii bowling.
Yeah, there is a Metroid Prime pinball. It's on the DS. I thought there was.
I'm gonna have to play that. I'm gonna have to. That's another console. I know I've just bought a Wii U, but next time I've got money, I'm gonna have to buy a 3DS because I really want to. There's a bunch of games on that console that I want to buy.
Cool, yeah, I'd like to get into some 3DS stuff for the pod at some point in time.
Lost on that. They're going to be no Nintendo. They're going to be stuck on that console forever. So we may as well.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. It's because of the hardware. They can't replicate that, can they? They're not going to bother.
We're going to have to do. Oh, I'm blanking on the name. That RPG. We're going to have to do that.
Fire Emblem?
No, it's on 3D. It's on DS. It's on Super Nintendo. Chrono Trigger. That's going to have to be one of the games.
Yeah, I think so.
Has to be. I've still got memories of waking up in your spare room?
Yeah.
The room that was filled with your mum and dad's memorabilia.
Yeah, their paraphernalia. Yeah,
and you were still sleeping, so I was sitting playing Chrono Trigger while I was waiting on you waking up.
Yeah.
Don't know why that was just stuck in my head.
That was before... Was that before we went to Gamescom together? Was that before we got on the plane?
That would have been because I think my first.
Or was that an EGX thing?
So I came down the first time I came down to visit you. I went to Eurogamer, and then I think I just came down. I'm sure I've been down a few times to your mum and dad's, and I don't think surely every time I wasn't just down to do something. I think I was just.
No, there was one time where you came and we played Dark Souls 2, sat next to each other with two TVs hooked up.
That was before either of us understood what the Souls games were. I think
it was, yeah.
Weirdly baffled by them.
Well, no, that was I think a second time, because I think we had played some by then. The first time was when we tried to play Dark Souls 1, like taking it in turns, and kept going the wrong way. But then they had that other time where you brought your console with you, and we hooked them both up, and we both just sat there playing on separate TVs next to each other.
Dream.
We really were. And we also, and there was what was the Rogue Legacy? We had a massive Rogue Legacy marathon, all like till 3 a.m.
I have to admit, I am disappointed in the direction they chose to go with the new Rogue Legacy 2. I don't necessarily.
That's why we haven't got it on the pod. I think neither of us could see it through.
No, they just complicated it in a way that I just don't think that game needed to be complicated. They added sort of limbs to it that didn't need to be there. Like the wonderful thing about Rogue Legacy was that it was fun, it was challenging, it had progression in a sort of wrapped up ball that was a fairly simple to understand thing. But then they added each region, rather than just being harder areas of each thing like it was in the first game, they basically turned each region into a world that had to be traversed, and it's just not what I was looking for that game, which is a shame, because Rogue Legacy is maybe one of my all-time favourite games. Maybe. I'd need to think about that before I made such a bold proclamation. But we're not here to talk about Rogue Legacy, we're here to talk about Metroid Prime. Alex, I want to ask you about, because we've been sort of speaking about enemies in the game, are there any bosses that stick out to you as particularly fun? I have got a bunch of bosses open here, so if none are jumping out to you, I could run through a couple. But if you've got some that just jump to mind, feel free to jump in and go for it. Do you want me to tell you my favourite one?
Yeah, I think you might have to.
My favourite one was, and I'm going to look it up, I'm going to get the name right, but sorry, I've got confused now, because I've sat and opened up every boss in the game, and there's one boss that I've seen that I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck that is. Anyway, the one I think it's called, my favourite one is called Flagre. It was the massive plant that you've got to shoot.
Yeah, I thought you might say that.
And then
you've got to shoot the little
wee flap, and then you've got to roll your ball in.
You have to shoot the little like sun panels to like hit it with whatever it was, like burn it basically.
That just felt different to the other bosses in the game, and it felt quite unique. And
I think the worst one's that shitty robot fire thing. It was just such a lazy crap boss.
To me, the bosses in this game fall into two quite distinct categories. There's the bosses that are really fun, really well thought out, and really quite like just different and feel unique, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And then there's the bosses that are just effing annoying.
I remember that you absolutely just your stream you killed it. I think there was one I was trying to I think I was obviously sitting there backseat gaming you while you were playing, and I was like, you just need to you need to use your super missiles, but use them conservatively. And you said something like, I'm not using them conservatively, I'm done. And you just turned the stream off.
I felt bad after that.
Because I was really enjoying watching you, and I just had nothing to do. Didn't know what to do with myself. I was like,
I had the worst game rage, and I was like, I'm at a crossroads here. I know the anger is bubbling.
Yeah,
and there's a chance that I take my anger out on the wrong person here. So I'm just gonna bail before this all goes wrong.
No, I totally understand it. If you're in that state, you don't want someone to tell you what you've done wrong or how to do it better. You're just determined to do it by that point. I did a bit
of a Doom 64 on it though, because I was like, I'm done, and then I went away for 10 minutes. I think I had a coffee, and I was like, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm going back.
That wasn't even the final boss, was it? That was because you didn't do the final boss on stream. It was the one.
I'm glad
before
I didn't do the
that
boss on stream. It was Omega. Was it the Omega Pirate?
Yeah, I think so. The one where you've got to shoot. Is that the one where you got to shoot his limbs and then he goes invisible?
And then he goes invisible. So
and sets a bunch of space pirates on.
I want to say I found a way to absolutely wallop that guy. So the way that you wallop him is, so you get to the point in the game where when you get him to turn into his like ghost self, so you have to change your view. As you do that, 3 enemies always drop. two of them are the same color. One of them is a different color that you've got to change. If you kill the two that are the same color, ignore. So say there's two red ones and one yellow. If you kill the red ones, ignore the yellow one, and then just as soon as the red ones are dead, turn your attention to the Omega Pirate. You can take about a third of his health off before he gets off his station to go and redo his thing. And then when he gets off his station and comes back to life, he kills the other guy for you because he starts sending out his wave-based stuff, and you don't have to engage. You don't have to engage with it. So it turned from...
Doesn't one of them sit on the wall as well? Is that the third one? Does he not just like hang on a wall and watch?
Yes.
Almost.
So it turns from being like what I was getting raging at is being like a 30-minute fight into about a 10-minute fight if you just ignore one enemy and just start piling onto the Omega Pirate, because it also cuts off the time that he allows himself, that you're allowing him to replenish his health as well. So you're doing massive damage while he's in that mode, but also you're cutting down the time where he's on his own, not getting attacked. So that is the way to do it. But in the run up to that, I was losing my mind. That gave me rage. It didn't give me as bad rage as the final boss, but thankfully, well, actually, the Ridley was okay. It was
Ridley's fine. Ridley's quite fun, actually.
Fine. It was Metroid Prime Creature, I think. Well, according to this wiki guide, it's called Metroid Prime Creature, the spider, basically.
Not the actual. Oh, that one. So not the final boss, like the first stage.
Yeah. Oh, when he when he turns into his like ethereal ghost self.
Yeah, and he's just like a fucking nervous system flying about.
Yeah, I hated that.
Hated that. Yeah, the worst bit about that is obviously that it follows a similar formula to the Omega Pirate, but you have to use both visors, and then you have to hit him with that fucking ultra beam or whatever it is, hyper beam, whatever. Well, you got to stand on the blue phazon puddle to be able to harness it and shoot him with your gun, and you can't do any damage to it other than that, and it's firing Metroids at you all the time, which you can barely see because you've got these stupid visors on. And that isn't, and considering that, I don't think if you die you don't get a chance to just come back to the second stage. You've got to do the whole boss again,
the whole thing again. So
thank God we're both using save states, because I've played this on the Wii console, so I've done this the hard way. And I'm a lot older now, and I've got less patience and time for that shit.
I think forever, the biggest if I could dish out knighthoods and medals, it would be that you plowing through that final Parasite Eve boss, talking about save states and things like that. That was horrific. Not even just horrific, but actually like admiration that you managed to plow through that boy basically in hard mode.
Basically.
I'll give you a quick rundown. The problem is if I read out these bosses, so feel free to cut this if it doesn't make a good pod. The bosses we've got, the first one is Parasite Queen, and I remember that one. That's the one, so she's like it looks like a massive like cockroach or scorpion, and then there's like a force field that rotates around it, and there's gaps in the force field that you can shoot through. That one was okay. I think with me the bosses, again, like obviously for me they fall into two characters: the fuck you category and the fun category. The thing I find interesting about Metroid, and it's something that, given that like we've recently played Super Metroid, that is carried through, is that like the game goes from being an interesting puzzle to when you hit a boss, it is like an instant like brick wall that you've got to sit and like just work your way through and try and just get better at the game and try and work it out. And I have to admit, like if we hadn't played so many Souls games over the years, I would have been struggling to get through these games. But it's a mindset you can sort of click into gear and like, I've just got to figure out how to beat this. And I guess that makes me maybe appreciate the Souls games in a different way, because I understand the mindset of where people are coming from, because you're looking at games like this. But like I don't know, like the sort of succinct paragraph to this is that bosses in this game don't fuck about, in my experience.
No, absolutely not.
It goes from being like, because I think for the most part when you're traversing the world, it's mostly okay. It's mostly easy. It's mostly doable. And then you encounter a boss and it's like, nope, I am going to get you unless you have upgraded yourself enough or you figure out what I'm doing, basically. And it's a theme that is run through both Metroid games that I've played, because I remember the final boss in Super Metroid being, I found that really tough as well.
Yeah.
If there's a few enemies in that game I found really tough.
Yeah, there are. The bosses don't muck about in that either.
No.
They just don't in general, I think.
But
I guess as far as a favorite one, probably Ridley.
Yeah.
Just because it's so massive and there's not too much of a trick to it, but I do like the plant one, as you say, because that's quite a mechanical fight. There's a lot of different parts to it. It's a very puzzly Zelda-like boss.
There was parts to it, and you sort of had to figure it out. There was a couple times where I'd like cause the plant thing damage, but I'd be too far away to get to the hole that I needed to roll down. It's just like sort of puzzling it out. The other one that there's another. I'm trying to look through the other ones. It's got Plated Beetle here as a boss, but I don't know if I necessarily would think that was a boss. That was just one of the beetles that you couldn't shoot in the face. You had to get round to its bum and shoot it in the bum.
Yeah, yeah.
Then it's got Hive Mecha, which is, it eventually becomes a room that you can just traverse without there being any enemies in it at all. It's that sort of green room fairly near the start. There's a disc in the middle of the floor that's sort of off kilter. That was okay. It was fairly easy. Was
just shooting bees mostly, in it.
Yeah, basically. Incinerator Drone. This is the one that I had a pause earlier on. I couldn't quite remember it.
It's just a
deleted that
flamethrower basically with multiple flames.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Then there's Flagra, which is the one we've just spoken about, which is probably my favourite. Shegoth, which looks to be like an electric version of one of those things with the ice backs that you've got to shoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You saw me on stream and I had a real tough time. I was trying to run through that area. I just got cornered by two of them and just got absolutely belted in. Yeah,
yeah. I remember that. Because I remember just thinking, just try jumping. You've got a double jump, just jump over everything. But yeah, they were not letting you get. You kept getting frozen by them, didn't you? They would just fire and freeze. But The
other one that I think is probably worth talking about. I don't know how you feel about it, but I remember I probably moaned about it at the time, but in hindsight, I actually quite like it. This Miss Wikipedia is calling it Thardus, and that's the one that's in the snow area where you've got to lock on to like different parts of it. Shoot it. I'm going to send you in fact.
Yeah, I think I know that one. That was quite good.
You tell me how to. Have you still got the Google Doc open?
Yeah.
Go follow that link I've just typed into it. That's the one. In hindsight, I quite enjoyed using that one, but you know why? It's because I had to use the ball to get away from it at times. This is another. Yeah, that's one of the other standout ones in my head. These ones.
Yeah, that one wasn't too ridiculous. You don't have to do anything stupid then, do you?
Not really, no. The other one this one's got is the Elite Pirate. That was actually okay once you told me how to beat it. That's the ones that come out of the test tubes.
Oh, with a little shield thing in their hand.
That soak up your stuff. Cloaked Drone. Do you know what this one is? I don't even remember this
hate one. That. You really hated that.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I've obviously hated it so much I've deleted it from my brain. We've also got Phazon Elite. Yeah, it was okay. Omega Pirate we've spoke about. Meta Ridley, which I think I agree with you, that was fun. The only one that really part of the Meta Ridley that I find quite difficult is she's got a tail whip, and I couldn't figure out how to avoid that if you got too close to her. And then there's obviously the spider that we kind of touched on before. I was really struggling with that until I realised that the grooves in the ground you could ball up and avoid getting hit when you rolled and then when it would just rush at you.
I remember that was that was just jump backwards as quickly as you can, but I don't think it was as possible as I thought. Just have a lot of health and tank it. I think this is how you do some of that stuff.
Yeah, basically. There's a couple of things I want to a couple more things I'd quite like to draw some attention to. So I think, for especially, I mean, even by a modern context, but especially for a game that came out in 2002, the map is excellent for me. I really enjoyed the way the map worked. Have you got any thoughts on the map? Like
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think there may have been one. The only thing that I think I said that I thought it lacked was a way for it to maintain just like some kind of indicator of where something is that you've already seen. Like I felt like if you'd seen something and you'd scanned it, it should then like keep that on the map, like items and things, or there should be a way to unlock, a way to find items without having to just like use X-ray vision on every fucking wall or scan something, or just remember. Because I think I remember saying to you, like after you'd gotten something before you went somewhere, I said like, this is the time you want to read a guide. Like if you want to go towards the question mark on the map, which is very helpful in giving you, it's like a really low key objective marker. It doesn't float above. It doesn't point an arrow in the sky for you to follow. It's just figure your way to get over here, and that's where your next objective is going to be. So I really liked that. And if you were going to go there, I always felt like go there, figure out what I want you to do when you get there, and progress through the actual main game. But on your way there, if you've acquired a new item, you're going to want to get a guide out to tell you all the places that you can use that item, because you'll definitely have forgotten them, and they'll be miles away, and you'll have to take this really like convoluted route around several different areas to get like loads of missile upgrades and health upgrades. So I think, yeah, obviously the game is expecting you to just continually explore, scan. But in terms of actually looking at the map and the way that it works, it's really well put together. It's a bit fiddly to control at first because you've got two sticks doing two different functions. But in terms of how far in you can zoom and how far out you can zoom and how you can, it kind of it tells you all the rooms that you need to go to. So everything's labeled, everything's listed, all the doors are put on there with the right colors of beams, even if you've never seen that door and don't have that beam. It's as helpful as it can be, like I say, aside from that last little bit of here's where the items are for when you can go get them, come back and get them, which later Metroid games have done. Metroid Dread does do that, and it will keep it on a map and say there's a missile upgrade here, you just need to figure out how to get to it. Yeah.
What do you think about
what do you think of the map? Did you? I think you said that you.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. Like I said, I totally agree with everything you've said. I enjoyed the way that we speak about these things a lot of the times, and when we eventually play a Dead Space game, I've got a feeling that you're going to be here. You're going to be here sitting wishing that I would shut my mouth. But like, my favorite thing about video games is when they can create a world in which the map and the environment become a character in its own right. And I think that this game does that in spades. Like you memorize and you sort of understand the map in a way that the game just, because the game forces you to traverse it so often, and the way that the game forces you to go back on yourself and return to other areas to expand upon things that you've maybe encountered but couldn't at the same time. The game just, the sort of environment in the map becomes, like I say, a character in itself, and you sort of, I don't know how to explain it other than to say sort of, you just sort of begin to understand it and understand the world that you're in a way that is really interesting, and I think a lot of games don't do. I sort of butted up against a bit of a conundrum in that sometimes I would be looking at the map and see that I have to do a lot of traversal back through many different areas to get to different lifts to end up in a different area that I want to get to. And I think I initially or ultimately found that quite frustrating. But if I'm trying to figure out how you do that better, but still keep the essence of making this feel like a real world that you're moving around in, I'm not sure how you do it differently. Does that make sense? Because obviously the easy way to sort this out is to, at some point, unlock a fast travel to the elevators.
Yeah.
do you undermine what I assume the game is trying to do and create its own, have the world be its own character by doing that? Because at some point you can just zoom places. I can see both sides of the argument. On one side, I can see someone saying, no, you have to traverse it because then you sort of understand and feel the environment in a way that you don't if you're
that definitely
traveler.
happens.
Yeah.
That definitely happens because of that. Yeah.
But there's also a time issue and a sort of respect for the player's time that I can see on the flip of that. And yeah, ultimately, I'm not sure how I feel. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know how I feel about that. I understand why they've made the decision they've made. I guess it's just a give and take. There's no, this is the right decision. There's no drawback to this. There's no decision they could have made with that. I guess it's they're making the decision knowing that at some point, once you've played the game for 15, 20 hours, it's going to be a slog to just go back the way you've been 18 other times.
Yeah.
But you trade that off by everything I've said before.
Yeah, I think my take on it, I guess, is that the only issue that I guess I would have with the world design of this game is that a lot of the upgrades that you get only ever seemed to expand the play area. They never seemed to reduce the need for a large play area
and things like that. Yeah, that's a
Dark Souls style. Basically, Dark Souls is a game that basically built itself on you progress this far through and you'll open a shortcut that takes you straight like around the side of things. And Metroid games in the 2D space, I feel like they have done that quite a lot. Sometimes they will lock you off. Metroid Dread has had a lot of stuff written about it in the way that they purposely will block you off from areas half that you've already been through before to kind of stop you wasting your time going in there again. And there are other Metroid games where you will get an item that will actually end up sort of being like a bypass. You know, oh, now you've got this beam, you can go through this door, and that actually takes you around here without you having to go the previous way you did before. Whereas here, because they're obviously going for such a wide, massive play area, that it just seems like, yeah, you're getting new items and that allows you to access another area. But if you want to get right back to the beginning, there didn't ever seem to be a way that it made your life easier other than maybe the double jumping. You could probably do that quite quickly. But if you watch speedruns and stuff of this game, I'm almost certain it's out of bounds shit. Like there isn't. There's not a lot of like mastery of that.
There was an area, I can't remember what it was, but there's a bit I was looking at and I was like, how do I jump here to get there? And I looked it up on a YouTube video and it was some guy basically like perching himself on the side of geometry and stuff. And I'm like, nah, that's not what the game wants me to do. So I just ignored it and then just sort of, but I think, yeah, I totally 100% agree with that. And that actually like sort of surfaces things that I remember doing. Like, so like if I'd be like, oh, I'm here, I need to get over there. So what I need to do is I need to go this room, take a right, then take a left, then take a right, then go straight on, then take a right. I'd eventually be going through that in my head and then get to a point where I'm thinking, right, take a right, and then I look around and go, oh, I can't get up there. And then I look at the map and then the map would be taking me a whole long way around. It's like, this is pointless. Just let me go up there and go through that door and I can go where I need to be. So yeah, it does do things like that. And I think there's maybe certain quality of life. Like I think the game could probably give me the grappling hook thing, you know, the swinging grappling hook thing. It'd be nice if it gave you that earlier because that would give you access to areas that would create that sort of shortcut loops that you were talking about.
That's probably the most obvious shortcut I saw was the grappling hook can get you over this lava bit that you had to jump on some platforms on before. But it's really not, it's negligible. It's not a major part of the game you can get rid of. It's one tiny bit of one room. So, yeah, I can't think how the other games have done it since then. But I would hope that they would take some cues from something like the way Dark Souls designs its worlds with looping around. Everything's just effectively one big circle of itself that you eventually you fill in the gaps and you connect the circle again at the end. I would love to see Metroid Prime take more of that approach to it rather than just continually expanding it further and further outwards because now you can get through the ice door or whatever.
Yeah. The other thing I want to quickly chat about is the music in this game. I think the magma area of this game
it's in my head now already.
I love it. That is one of my favorite. Like I remember, because it's the second area you go to, isn't it? And I remember you're walking around this area and you get this lift down, and you walk off this lift, and this beat starts, and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing! I love it down here. It's great. And then eventually these things become a bit of a bit trivial, but that's just how these games are designed. But you walk out and there's that massive lava snake that comes and just F's you up. Yeah, I loved the introduction to that magma area, and I think that to me is my standout moment to this game is the music sort of joined up with your sort of entrance into your first lava zone, where you get everything sort of paced out in front of you, and then like some of the enemies are like that. Like I say, that lava snake feels vicious at the time. Ultimately, he's not, but he does at the time.
Yeah, I think that lava area really is the first time you've ever had what could be conventionally described as music playing.
Yeah.
There's there is some in the Chozo area that you've been in before that and Talon, but it's really atmospheric and sort of ambient
really well.
Yeah, but it's not exactly like a full-on song with a melody in it. It's just kind of ambience in the background to kind of make you feel lost or whatever, whereas this is like this booming kind of crescendo that's got this like orchestral instrumentation going on, whereas before it was just kind of like sci-fi noise, and I think this game mixes that really well. And I think I said to you as well, like as you go back to some of these areas later on, they just totally changed the way the music is playing anymore. So when the stakes have gone higher or whatever, when you're re-going through an area again, that's really cool the way they kind of like up the tempo of the music and start adding more stuff in there. It's got a great soundtrack, this game. It's not something you can just stick on in your car and cruise through the streets on, but for the type of game that it is, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think for me, I have to offer a slight caveat in that, like, I think I totally agree with you that the soundtrack for this game is good. I do have slight reservations about odd moments of the sound design. There's an alien. Is it the ghost aliens that are really shrill?
Oh, I forgot about that song as well. By the way, I hate that. I forgot about that fucking pirate song.
Yes.
God, awful.
There's the shrill like screeching of those ghost pirates, and then there's when you get low health, you get that buzzer that goes off, and it is incessant. I think
I didn't really get that often, but yeah.
Oh, there's a bit where you watched me. There was a 20-minute period where I was eking my way through the game, struggling, trying to look for a save point, and I had that, like I say, for about 20 minutes, and I was ready to just like smash my earphones in, like. So like there are bits like there's I think they're deliberately uncomfortable, but they're uncomfortable at the point that I find it difficult to listen to, and I find
for sure,
rage inducing, which is obviously not their end goal. They don't want to make their players angry while they're playing.
No.
But yeah, I think like I say, the music was great, the ambience was fantastic. I just think the odd sound design choice probably shows its age a little bit. I don't want to say it's bad, because I don't think it's necessarily bad at all. I just think it's just a relic of its time.
Yeah,
perhaps.
And let's not forget, some of it was done by loads of dudes burping. So there's still that. We've always got that.
I think overall though, this game for me is an incredibly smart game.
Yes,
it's intelligent. It does things in an interesting way, and very often I don't know, it does a lot of things. It will test your player's skill. It will make the player think, and it often sort of sprouts up moments of brilliance that you're like, wow, I can't believe a game of this age is doing this. I can't believe how interesting and fun and engaging this mechanic is. Mm-hmm. And I know I keep coming back to it, but they made rolling a ball around a map really, really fun in a way that I wouldn't have expected them to do. And they
didn't even want to do. Miyamoto made them do it.
I also think that, like, to build on that, like when we're talking about the balls and stuff like that, each power and each sort of augmentation they give you, and each sort of additional piece to your armory feels meaningful. There's nothing that the game gives you, you're like, oh, this is just
totally
something that is meaningless and is something that I'm never going to engage with again. Everything you get in this game, whether it's your grappling hook, whether it's turning a ball, whether it's a vision, whether it's your effing scanner,
or the suit that lets you go under the water and move normally, or
yes, everything feels meaningful, and everything is required to engage with the game properly. And I think that is something that is incredibly unique. Like we were speaking about this before we started recording, but like Sonic, the new Sonic Frontiers game, for example, is a game that I'm constantly unlocking things in. I don't engage with them after I've unlocked them. This game will give me something, and I know when this game gives me something that I'm going to have to use it at some point, and the game's going to force me to use it.
Yeah,
on numerous occasions. It's
going to become vital as soon as you get it.
Like, and to go back to again the spider. So you spend a lot of time going about as a ball, and then it allows you. It's about 2/3 of the way through the game to be able to stick to walls as the ball, and then that just becomes an integral part of the game that you've got to learn how to do and think about and engage with. I can't think of many other games that do that and just force you to engage with absolutely every mechanic that it presents to you. And I think that's the games for me. I've got in this Google Doc overall thoughts and standout moments. That's mine, in that it forces you to engage with absolutely everything that the game has to offer. And I can't think of any other games that do that.
Yeah, and I think that also adds as well to like how you unpack the game as the player, and that's a really clever way of having that play out, in that so much of this game is being lost or trying to figure something out or where to go, and that could be so easily overwhelming. But the game's map, the game's items, even the scanning, all helps you in such a way that it really, like, for a game on the surface that looks like it's not going to help you at all and basically just wants you to be feeling lost. You know, we can go back to Scorn again, where at the beginning of that game I felt completely lost over and over again, going through similar corridors, getting really frustrated with it. No, it wasn't. But like I said, the intricacy of the game's map and the way that you can use the map to look around, the scanner, which I know people find annoying, but you can scan so many things. Like, that's just a get out of jail card that the game will constantly give you, that if you remember to engage with it, or if you choose to engage with it, it will tell you something of where you go. It will tell you, oh, this... Do you remember the bit where you've got to try and open a gate, and it says about statues being flawless? And I remember the first one you scanned it, me and you were exactly the same thing. We laughed, because that just sounds dumb. Like, why are you telling me that it's flawless? Isn't that an opinion? I will tell you if it's flawless, but because one of them isn't.
Yeah,
one of them has got cracks in it, and there's loads of areas like that will just kind of give you that little hint of, oh, this has got some dents or cracks through it or whatever. So I just, because there's so many things at play and how you're going to get around the game, you're unlocking all these things as you go along. You're going to brand new areas that are then looping back to older areas, and yet all of it feels as close to as intuitive as it can, and yet sometimes that's not the case, because you're just not in the mind of the developer and you don't know what they're expecting you to do. And that's the worst feeling in a game, is I don't know what this game wants me to do right now, and I'm stuck and I'm lost. Whereas this game does this like almost subliminal large number of things to help you figure it out without ever telling you explicitly what you're supposed to do, except for go here. But even then, you can't just warp there. You're going to have to find your way all the way through. And if you don't have the item that you need when you get there, you're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you said, smart is a really good way of putting it. It's a really cleverly put together game. And the fact that it's rated so much higher than the second two shows how well they smashed this the first time around.
Yes, totally agree.
And to make it feel like a Metroid game, I mean, how many games go through transitions like this and feel as quintessentially the same as they did in the previous iteration as this game does? Like, yes, Mario 64 was groundbreaking, but it doesn't feel like Mario World or Mario 3. It doesn't feel anything like that. Zelda probably is up there in terms of like people getting it right.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, Castlevania absolutely fucked it.
Yeah, they absolutely fucked it. It's an interesting
all the 3D
period of
ones
games.
are terrible.
It's an interesting period of games that I'm not sure we'll ever see it.
Sonic.
Yeah, it's an interesting period of games that I'm not sure we'll ever see a game again. In that, like we had these like massive global franchises, like you're saying, like Mario, like Donkey Kong, like like Castlevania, like all these games that sort of were huge in the 2D era, and then they tried to make the transition into the 3D era, and that transition is littered with casualties that never made it. I mean, Pac-Man is probably another example of one that didn't.
Jim,
exactly,
Bubsy,
just like
anyway, but
attempted to make the transition into the 3D era and just fell flat on its face. And it's a tough one. It's a really tough one, and I think any franchise that has managed it, warts and all, if it's come out the other side with a quality game, and not just a quality game, this, like I was saying, like we were speaking about earlier in this podcast, this is sitting with a 97 on Metacritic. This is not just a quality game.
And it's not even made by Nintendo themselves. This
has made the jump from being a quality game to one of the best rated Metacritic games ever. And it's a rarity, and it is increasingly rare. Like not increasingly rare. It's not increasing because we've gone through that era. It's something that we don't see very often, in that so many games. I think Donkey Kong to me is the one that sticks out. That Donkey Kong 64 is not.
Yeah.
I think there's a niche fan base for that game, but it is not the quality games. I mean, like, I think there's a reason these games have gone back to 2D largely, right?
Yeah. Same with Sonic until now, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, Metacritic in terms of its score has this ranked at like 19, but I get in reality, it is joint sixth best game all time in terms of Metascore, with only Ocarina of Time getting a 99, and then you've got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, GTA 4, Soul Calibur, Grand Theft Auto having a 98. Sorry, Grand Theft Auto 4 have a 98, and then everything else is on 97.
I know this sold well in the GameCube, but it didn't sell as well as those games.
No, I don't. No, I don't think it did crazy numbers. Even, well, I don't know. Let's see. It was one of the best-selling games on the GameCube, which is again not a great selling console. So 250,000 its first week. It was the second best selling, that's in North America. It was unfortunately released behind GTA Vice City. It sold nearly 2 million, 1.5 million in the US alone. Apparently, 2.84 million copies worldwide. So it's again kind of one of those games. It's those numbers kind of seem a bit nothing. Is that nothing now or not?
How did Mario Sunshine sell?
There we
go. Drink.
It's because I have it right on the edge of the desk.
I'm trying to think of the biggest selling games on that console. Mario Sunshine must be up there. Mario Kart will be up there.
I hope so.
So if we're comparing it to those, because like if we're talking about one of the best games of all time.
So it's sixth all-time top sellers on the GameCube. The top one is Smash Brothers, then Mario Kart, then Mario Sunshine.
In terms of numbers for those,
Smash Brothers goes 7.4 million.
So it sold over 3 times better.
Yeah, and then you've got nearly 7 million Double Dash, 6.2 Mario Sunshine, Wind Waker 4.4, Luigi's Mansion 3.3, but that was a launch game, and then this 2.8. But I mean, let's look at something like. I mean, I feel like 2.84 is not a lot of units, but is it?
What are we judging? 2002, I think that's good, because that was during the period that if you sold 1 million, you got platinum status in the PlayStation. That to me used to be the sort of litmus test of a successful game. If you hit platinum, you've been a gangbuster.
Yeah, because I guess the user base is so much smaller. Because I mean, if you look at something, and of course it's one platform as well. So I tried to look at a game from this year, and I just looked at Elden Ring, and that sold like 17.5 million copies. So it's weird, isn't it?
It's also a bigger
to go back and think
that. It's a bigger marketplace now.
Yeah, exactly. The industry is nowhere near where it was then compared to now. It's so far away from that.
In 2022 is probably not a great success, unfortunately, for a lot of people.
I guess that's why it feels easy to look down on Metroid Prime and think, oh, I didn't sell that well, but it obviously did.
Well, it obviously did, but also I just feel like Nintendo have been quite resistant to make new ones, which tells me they don't value the franchise in the way that they perhaps should.
Let's have a look for comparison at the N64. So it sold about 2.84. So if you're comparing that to the N64, your closest one to that is Yoshi's Story, sold 2.85 million copies. So that's behind things like Wave Race, Pokemon Snap, Banjo-Tooie, Star Fox. You know, there's a lot of games that sold a lot more on their previous console. But again, the GameCube was where Nintendo really started to hit the bricks.
Yeah, they struggled there
for a bit. Yeah. Mario 64 sold 11.9, but that was a pack in for a lot of them, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which I suppose this is a natural jump-off point to episode 47 of the Winners You podcast. You did mention another game when you were talking about big sellers in the GameCube. Do you want to?
I did.
You did, but then that's not the next game.
No, it's not.
It's going to be a Nintendo 64 game,
which sold more than Metroid Prime.
What were the sales finally before you announced the game? What were the sales of this game then? While we're doing that, as another clue, it started out life not. It ended up being a mascot game, but it didn't start off life as that. It started off being a very different game that Nintendo... Am I right in saying this? Nintendo decided that it would get a better brand recognition if you introduced this lad as the main character. Because I think the main character of this game was meant to be the tiger, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I think so. And it sold 4.8
Is this the first time we saw Banjo?
Yeah. Well.
I would love it if it hasn't come to pass, but I would have loved it if it turned out that if you went through the characters in this game, each one eventually got its own game.
That'd be so good.
So good, wouldn't it? Because it's got Conquer in there. Does it not? Did I make that up?
Yeah.
It's got Conquer. It's got a monkey
Banjo.
Thing. Yeah, it's got Banjo.
It's got old Diddy Kong as well.
It's got a badger.
Bumper the Badger. Money, Bumper.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it sold 4.88 million. It's the only game in the top 12 best-selling N64 games that wasn't developed by Nintendo.
Wow.
Published by Nintendo.
It wasn't published by Nintendo.
No, Rare published it themselves.
And were Rare independent at this point? Because this must be post GoldenEye.
No, this was before they sold them to Microsoft. This is when they were a second-party developer.
Oh, so it wasn't published by Nintendo, but it was published by a Nintendo-owned company. Yeah.
Yeah. But all the other games that Rare did for the N64 were published by Nintendo, like GoldenEye and Banjo. Yeah, weird. But yeah, we're talking Banjo-Kazooie, which again has an anniversary this month of November.
Diddy Kong Racing.
25 years, yes.
We're talking Diddy Kong Racing, not Banjo-Kazooie. That will come at another date.
Did I say Banjo-Kazooie?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's Freudian.
This sold more than Banjo-Kazooie, which is... I think that's a crime.
I'm looking forward to this podcast. I have been having a fantastic time with this game. So I'm looking forward to when we decide to chat about it.
Yeah, boy.
Next up. And then after that, we've got what I was talking about. We're going to be playing some Wind Waker, which I've just bought a Wii U for, so I better fucking enjoy it.
Yes. You've tried a few times, so it's finally time to actually finish it.
Exactly. And I guess that brings it. Have you got any housekeeping? Are you up to anything? You have a recent magazine launch to be selling.
I'm not talking about that. You'll find out why when you go on Discord after this. But
Okay. And I guess
yeah,
with on that bombshell, I have been David. He has been Alex. We have been the Winners You, and I'm out.
keep gaming.
That's it. I'm glad we got this in the bag. It took a while to get
Yeah,
ourselves organised.
and we got it out before the anniversary, which is perfect.
I am glad we've done it. No, I need to export project. MP3? Was it 47?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry it took so long for us to get this in the bag, but we got
Oh, don't worry. We were both. I think every time we delayed the pod, we were both needing it delayed.
Yeah, my November is just in fact my whole arse end of the year it's just a bit nuts. So obviously I had at the end of October I had Scotland, Australia, and then the week after that I had Scotland, Fiji, then I had Scotland, New Zealand last week. Next week again I've got Scotland, Argentina, then the week after that I'm in Copenhagen, and then I think the weekend after that I'm free. And then the weekend after that, I've got a Christmas night out. The weekend after that, I've got another Christmas night out. Then the weekend after that, it's Christmas, and then it's New Year. So basically, my entire last 2 months of my year is just filled.
Oh, it's going out with a bang.
Going out with a bang.